Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us to learn more about how COVID-19 has been affecting the craft brew industry, including a variety of impacts and opportunities. Before we get started, I need to get through just a little bit of legalese. The material appearing in this presentation is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as advice of any kind, including without limitation legal, accounting, or investment advice. This information is not intended to create and receipt does not constitute a legal relationship, including but not limited to an accountant-client relationship. Although this information may have been prepared by professionals, it should not be used as a substitute for professional services. If legal, accounting, investment, or other professional advice is required, the services of a professional should be sought. Thank you very much for getting through that with me, everybody. My name is Kirk Faris. I am a tax senior manager here at Moss Adams. I have with me Collin McDonnell, the CEO and co-founder of HenHouse Brewing Company. Collin, how are you doing today?
Doing as well as is possible under the circumstances. Yourself?
Doing as well as can be. The shelter-in-place life is hard, I know, for all of us, but we do our best and keep things moving. On that front, Collin, maybe could you help us set the stage? Give us a quick overview of your company, both before this outbreak and what you're dealing with right now.
Absolutely. So HenHouse Brewing Company is in our 9th year now, just turned 8 in January. We have a brewery in Santa Rosa, California, with a tasting room there at the brewery, and then we have a secondary tasting room and barrel aging facility just down the road in Petaluma. So with 2 retail locations that do about 30% of revenue for us, or used to do about 30% of revenue for us, and then the vast majority of what we do is wholesale. We're a pretty spread out business in terms of income streams. We also, because we self-distribute the vast majority of our beer, we also distribute for a small number of other breweries. And so we had a lot of different income streams coming into this, which is an important part of our ability to kind of pivot there. But generally speaking, revenue was about 1/3 retail from the tasting rooms, 1/3 wholesale draft, and 1/3 wholesale package, roughly speaking, heading into the month of March. And then obviously the month of March changed that for us pretty significantly.
And maybe tell us about some of those changes and what things look like now.
So California was one of the first states to go to aggressive shelter-in-place orders, which we're grateful for in a public safety sense. I believe the order came down on the 15th from the county that there was a shelter-in-place order. All essential businesses were to close down, or all non-essential businesses. Breweries were deemed as essential businesses in that first draft, which I think is a testament to not only the kind of legacy of craft brewing in California, but also the effectiveness of the California Craft Brewers Association as a lobbying organization. So we were able to keep our 2 retail locations open as curbside pickup to go only locations. So we don't allow anybody inside the building, but we're still selling beer out the front door. We were pretty heavily can-focused before the shelter-in-place order, but with the shelter-in-place order, we just fully went to no growlers, no crowlers. All we're doing is selling beer that was canned in the brewery, just because that's the way to be most sure of the cleanliness of the beer. So we're selling cans out of the tasting rooms. The overnight, half of our customers, all of the on-premise customers just went away. There's still a small number of them who are doing the delivery and pickup life, but the vast majority of our on-premise customers just went away. So our whole sales and delivery team had to pivot really, really hard to being significantly more grocery store oriented. We're lucky to have, we had a really good year last year. We did about 12,000 barrels of beer, just about the size where you start building relationships with Whole Foods, Safeway, Rayleigh's, other chain corporate retailers. And so we were really lucky to be in a position where we could pivot to rely on them more heavily as customers, and they've been super, super supportive, which is kind of part of our way of moving through this. That said, we did we took care of those customers, and that's been really essential in kind of preserving as much revenue as possible. But we did have to furlough our entire staff 25%. So from me as the CEO all the way on down, everybody just took a 25% pay hit 2 weeks ago, which is brutal. But for us, we want to make sure that we're positioned to recover, and keeping our team intact is for us kind of a central strategic thing we need to do to get to recovery.
Right. And, it's my understanding that California laws and the ABC, there's been some loosening of some of these laws. How has it allowed you to kind of find some new sales channels?
So the ABC, again, reacted fairly quickly here in California, and I know it has not been as fast in other states. The ABC came down and loosened a significant number of regulations. They changed the credit laws up until last month in the state of California. You're not allowed to extend terms longer than 30 days to wholesale customers. They immediately relaxed that. That's good for restaurants that have seen 80 to 100% of their revenue disappear and are trying to find out how to do the to-go thing. It's not really great for breweries who are worried about collecting their receivables, but it was a pretty dramatic change. There's been a significant amount of relaxing around restaurants' abilities to sell alcoholic beverages to go. And that's just change from the ABC. That was not legislative. That was just administrative change. So, they've opened up a significant amount of off-premise channels in that most restaurants can become off-premise now, but that doesn't necessarily mean those restaurants are designed in such a way to do it profitably.
Got it. And then did you guys also add any direct-to-consumer delivery?
We did. So one of the big things that we did after a week and a half of to-go only sales in the tasting rooms, we realized it wasn't going to get us where we wanted to go. The state of California had allowed shipping beer for retail purposes within the state already. We just had never taken up on that. And so within a week and a half of the shelter in place, we had a web store up, and using Golden State Overnight, which is a shipping company in California, does, as the name would suggest, overnight delivery. And we're shipping whole cases to consumers throughout the entire state. There's a lot of ups and downs there. Part of the reason that we self-distribute so much of our beer is because we are very protective of the custody of the beer. We want to make sure that it stays cold the whole time. We have refrigerated trucks. We deliver into refrigerators only. We're really, really protective of that. And so shipping was something that just a little bit outside our comfort zone in terms of control on a quality side. But given our options, that was a decision we had to make. Been really happy thus far with the speed of delivery. People are, we're shipping in in insulated packages, and people are getting beer in less than 24 hours. So they're getting cold beer, which is super, super important to us. And thus far, the reception to that has been very, very strong. I'm curious in the medium term if that will stay the case as more and more folks go to shipping beer the way that we are.
Gotcha. Let's pivot to some of the programs that the federal government has been pushing out in the last couple of weeks and your experience with them, particularly the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, and the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, the EIDLs, both of which are partially managed by the SBA, one partially with banks involved, one strictly with the SBA. Could you tell us about your own experiences with those so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with Live Oak Bank as our primary lending partner. They've been amazing and super supportive through all of this, and we're working on our PPP loan through them. So as everyone is, I'm sure, aware, the PPP loans are the forgivable loans that are covered through the SBA. The way that works is you get the loan size is 250% of your 2019 average monthly payroll. Payroll expenses include wages, healthcare, and a couple other things. And then you have to spend 75% of that over the first 8 weeks that you get that loan in-house on payroll. So again, wages and healthcare. And if you spend 75% of that money on payroll, the entirety of the loan is forgiven after the 8 weeks. That's primarily a program designed to keep workers off of unemployment and keep them getting paychecks from their employers. That is categorically a good thing, in my opinion, but it is important to understand that that's the purpose of the program, to keep people off unemployment, not to keep your business open. So for folks who still have some revenue, like us, we like protected that wholesale can revenue, trying to build a little bit of retail revenue. This is really, really helpful for us, and it's in essence buying us time on payroll to build those income streams as we kind of navigate the new terrain. For folks who have gone to zero revenue, folks who are entirely retail-based businesses, that's basically, it covers 8 weeks of payroll and rent, and that's it. It's not going to cover your existing AP balance. It's not going to cover utilities. It's not going to cover the other things in life that cost money. And so it's pretty important to know that going in, that the point of that is to keep people getting paychecks rather than being on unemployment. And it isn't, a business continuity grant by any stretch of the imagination. That said, for folks who still have revenue streams coming in, it's a really, really strong support function and something that people should definitely be looking into. The application process is not too onerous as it stands right now. It's a personal guarantee and some very basic payroll reporting for 2019. If you have any kind of digital payroll processing, the payroll reporting that you're going to need for applying for one of those loans is very, very direct. I don't think anybody should be intimidated by the paperwork side of it. The important one to keep in mind there and prepare for is that there will be more paperwork on the back end to make sure that the loan is forgiven. So it's very, very important to document how that money is spent, particularly in terms of covering payroll expenses. So it's, I don't think anybody should be afraid of the upfront paperwork burden, but definitely step up all of your recording and documentation of payroll expenses in particular, if you are pursuing that, so that you can get to the forgiveness point. Because if you don't spend 75% of that money on forgiveness, it turns into a 1% 2-year loan, which is the first 6 months of payments are deferred. So it's really an 18-month loan, which is a pretty large payment. So if you don't do the proper documentation to get to full forgiveness and spend 75% of that money on payroll expenses, then you can be left with really large, really aggressive payments. And it's important to know that going in and do that documentation going into it. That's so kind of like as far as like things that I'm working on this week. PPP applications started getting accepted Friday of last week. And so that's the big push this week, is to get that through.
Yeah. Before we talk about the EIDL, just for our listeners, I want to pass along, we're recording on Tuesday morning, April 7th. We're not going to deep dive the rules of the PPP because, quite honestly, the guidance has been changing on us daily. By the time we post this recording, the intricate details involving calculations of what percentage of your employees that you kept, how you define payroll costs for the 250 percentage for how much you can get for a loan. A lot of these details we're getting guidance on daily. So we would really recommend reach out to your bank, reach out to your accountant, reach out to your lawyers if you have questions about this, because there are going to be some additional details that we're not going to cover in great detail. Collin, can we maybe talk about an EIDL loan and what you're doing on that front?
Absolutely. So the EIDL is not quite as rapidly changing as the PPP, but similarly does have a lot of change happening to that program right now. So the EIDL is just a straight loan. It's a very, very cheap loan, and it comes directly from the SBA, but it is just a loan. So as they stand right now, the EIDL is a 3.75% interest rate loan with a 30-year term. So it's about as cheap of money as you're ever going to find. That said, it's just a loan. The EIDL is split into two chunks. So depending on how much money you're eligible for, the SBA has dramatically expedited the first $500,000 of EIDL lending. The total cap is $2 million. So the first $500,000 you can get very, very quickly. They're really working on moving that through quickly. And I believe that's a personal guarantee and a little bit of documentation that your company is a real company. It's not overwhelming. Again, I wouldn't advise anybody to put off moving through that application process because the paperwork is really not that bad. They've updated the website, so it's largely a digital form for an application. And the turnaround time has been pretty fast thus far. We're, again, like being one of the first states that declared a state of emergency, the EIDL does require that you're in a disaster area. So California declaring a disaster earlier gave us a leg up in applying earlier. And we applied just over 3 weeks, or just under 3 weeks ago. And we're in the closing process now. So that first $500,000 can happen very, very quickly if you're well documented and able to focus on it. And I would encourage people to do that. The second half of the EIDL, that additional $1.5 million on top of the first $500,000, is a more traditional full underwriting loan. The way I understand it right now is you can do the expedited $500,000 loan and then apply for a loan modification, which requires the full underwriting process and, what you would think of as a loan application process. And they're estimating that timeline is 4 months right now. So the PPP is kind of uncertain right now just because the guidance is changing so quickly, but does seem to move faster than the EIDL. That said, the EIDL, can be a really, really good option for a lot of folks who, again, have revenue. One of the big considerations I would make with either of those things, if you're a brewer right now, kind of looking at your funding options, is what can you actually afford in the short term, and what's going to help you get there.
Right. So just to kind of reiterate through these two things, the PPP, I think many of us view as a very short-term loan, very focused on keeping your people employed. It's the life raft that's going to keep people above water. And the EIDL might be more of the tugboat coming out to get you, but it's going to take longer to get that EIDL, but it really is meant for a different set of expenses than the PPP. You're really going to focus on your payroll, maybe some rents, maybe a little bit of mortgage interest in the PPP, whereas the EIDL is looking out towards, okay, how's my business look over the next few months? Would you agree with that, Collin?
I agree. I like that metaphor a lot. Life as a boat versus tugboat is pretty good.
So moving on away from the loan programs, more into business strategy, one of the other big sources of cash that people tend to believe is always going to come through is their accounts receivable. And could you talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the craft brew market and what some of the risks are in existing accounts receivable?
Absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, we're a self-distributing brewery. Until December, we didn't have any distributors at all. So we have just over 1,000 customers total. About 700 of those are bars and restaurants. With the shelter-in-place order, bars and restaurants were deemed, non-essential businesses, and the ones that were deemed essential were not allowed to have people inside. So, basically, draft beer just kind of died midway through March. What that means is, through no fault of their own, our 700 bar and restaurant customers have no income, and I think it's totally unreasonable to expect that they would pay their bills in a timely way when faced with kind of an indefinite closure that they have no clarity on when it's going to be over. So one of the first things that I did with the shelter-in-place order was a pretty deep look at our accounts receivable aging report, and I just looked through and said, who are the people who are likely to pay us and who are not. And what we found was that we were anticipating losing just shy of $250,000 in accounts receivable. It's important to know that number because when you're planning a cash flow projection, you need to know what the incoming payments are going to look like. And just because you had the sales the week before doesn't mean you're actually going to see the payments. I'm not entirely confident that we will never collect that $250,000. But I certainly think that as long as the shelter-in-place is in order, it's unreasonable for us to plan on those payments coming in the door. And I think every brewery owner who has self-distribution footprint should be doing that same report. And the folks who work largely through distributors should be asking their distributors about that same analysis, because if it's bad enough for your distributor, that may become them stretching you out as well. Again, that's not taking shots at anybody, that's not criticizing anyone's business practices, that's just being realistic about where is the money actually going to come from. So I would recommend everybody look down your AR aging report and be pretty realistic about what you think you can actually collect, and then reach out to your distributors as well and ask them what they think they're going to collect. There's a significant amount, like I said, in California, of change on the ABC front. As I mentioned earlier, the ABC is now allowing us to extend credit up to 60 days for wholesale customers. Again, we can't afford to do that. Right now, conserving cash, having as much cash on hand is the number one priority. And so while that is a legal possibility for us, the risk of extending more credit to customers who may still be unable to pay doesn't put us in a financially better position. And it's important that you know how to communicate that to your customers. Our line to our customers is, anything that's out of code after the shelter-in-place order, we're obviously happy to replace with fresh beer, but we can't, we're not in a cash position to be buying back beer from people. As much as I would like to help our customers that way, it's just not a reality for us, and I don't think it's a reality for most breweries.
Right. In this economy, cash is king, and really focusing on when that cash will be there for you and what your outlays are is going to go a long ways towards getting through this.
Absolutely.
Looking past that, let's start to talk about, at some point, we all hope to be starting to get through this. We all believe the shelter-in-place orders are going to start getting lifted at some point in the future. I will not speculate a guess as to when that will be right now. But could you talk about how you believe your business might look different as we move to a post-shelter-in-place or a less restricted shelter-in-place going forward?
Absolutely. So I think it's important for people to realize that a lot of the changes they're having to make right now are more than likely permanent changes. So, for example, for us, one of the big ones is our web store. That was a thing that we weren't entirely comfortable doing before, but now, given that we're seeing some success there and that we're going to be doing it for at least the duration of the shelter-in-place order, it's probably a permanent part of our business plan from now on. And so rather than just kind of moving through it as a reactionary measure. We're trying to make sure that we're putting in the forethought to actually build on it as a comprehensive part of our business plan. I think that when you look at all parts of your business going forward, you need to have that consideration on how many of these changes are just permanent. So, some big considerations that I would have people thinking about is how many bars and restaurants are actually going to reopen. Even if the shelter in place only lasts for 3 more months, there's some number of those who are going to not make it that long, tragically. But then secondarily, until there's a vaccine, it's entirely possible that consumer behavior changes very dramatically, and that bars and restaurants are not going to be the same movers of volume that they used to be. That obviously has very direct impact on package splits. If you don't have an aggressive canning program and the quality to support it, that's going to be challenging moving forward because, again, we're looking at permanent changes. And one of those long-term durable changes is going to be a move away from on-premise and to off-premise, people buying cans for home. I think thinking about how you diversify your income streams, right? I think like one of the things that has been really, really good for us in terms of our ability to pivot was that our business had multiple income streams. And so looking forward, if you're a tasting room is 95% of revenue, brewery, like how can you stabilize with some more wholesale? If you're a wholesale 95% brewery, like how can you stabilize with some more direct customer sales? Like if you were on premise, how do you get more off premise? All those questions. I think it's going to be much more important for breweries to focus on diversifying income streams in the near term future. I think the other one to think about is if you are somebody who's focused on ABC restrictions right now, thinking about how long those restrictions will be relaxed and making sure that you're not overextending yourself on regulations that may come back into force quicker than you think they do.
That all makes a lot of sense. And as we look at past loosening of shelter in place and start to think about the next 12 to 18 months, I know in the media, 18 months is a very common timeline people talk about for vaccines. So we may be in unsettled times for a little while now. Could you talk about some of the planning you're doing really more of a year to a year and a half out from now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first part of that is like identifying what the potential risks are, right? And as we've discussed, the shelter in place is going to likely at this point last through June in California, and possibly longer. And once it's lifted, without a vaccine in place, future shelter in places may come through, which is part of that kind of like making sure that you're diversifying your income streams. So there's still the risk of future shutdowns like we're experiencing right now, and I think it's important to have a plan for those things, right? Like, what is your plan to diversify your income streams, to make sure that you're in a safer cash position? Like, start those plans now based on what you're doing right now and like project them out into the future. I think that's super, super important there. I think that one of the other things to be concerned about beyond just a possible shelter in place is this environment gives a lot of leverage to large chain retailers and large distributors. And it's entirely possible that you're going to see kind of more of the portfolio consolidation that you've seen in the state of California in particular, but nationally in both, chain corporate retail and in distributor relationships. So I think it'd be super, super important to plan on or start now and continue to build plans around building those relationships with your key retailers and your key distribution partners. I think those are super important.
That's great. So to close this out, we've had some necessary doom and gloom along the way in this conversation with regards to shelter in place, restrictions on on-premise, really trying to figure out how much of your AR to collect. Let's transition this and close out, maybe speak to some of the opportunities this is going to create as we come out on the other side.
Absolutely. I mean, I think everybody should still be looking to pursue whatever silver linings are there as aggressively as possible. That's why we're entrepreneurs in the first place. Packaged can sales are obviously a huge opportunity right now. Volume on the IRI tracked grocery channels has basically been the 4th of July 3 weeks in a row. And some of that is, people getting into the shelter in place and kind of figuring it out and maybe stocking up a little bit more than they otherwise would. But some of it is a permanent change towards people drinking beer at home more than drinking beer out. And so there's an amount of volume that just got moved from the off-premise channel into the from the on-premise channel into the off-premise channel, and it's going to be a durable change. So if you have packaging capabilities, if you have relationships with big retailers, those are going to be really, really valuable, and those are important to build on in the short term. Obviously the quality still has to be there. Just because people are drinking at home and not drinking in brewery tap rooms or at beer bars doesn't mean they've forgotten what good beer tastes like. So like one of the big things to focus on there is that there's a huge opportunity in off-premise sales for high quality cans. Have to throw out there, the glass is dead, don't invest in bottling your beer. The other big opportunity that I see right now too is in the state of California, and I've seen it in a couple of other states, the speed with which the ABC changed regulation was incredible and really reveals how much of what I would consider some of the more restrictive ABC laws are really just enforcement decisions and not legal decisions, right? They're not based in law, they're based in administrative policy. So if there are ABC restrictions that you'd like to see changed in some meaningful way, now is absolutely the time to be writing your legislators, to be in contact with your guilds. Here in California, we've got the CCBA, who works very closely with the ABC, which is great. But when those changes happen that quickly, it's an indication that there's an opportunity for more change. So I would also advocate that once you've got your business in line and you feel stable in where you are, I'm not going to suggest that anybody's going to feel great about where they are, but stable, that advocacy for changing ABC laws may be a significant avenue for future growth.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think to add on, Collin, you've got a pretty big social media presence where I've seen really some great information about reaching out to your representatives, not just about ABC, but really about the needs of small businesses. Did you want to add anything else on that front?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's super, super, super important to reach out to your representatives. Call their offices, write them letters. If you have the time, write a handwritten letter. It matters to them. Like reach out to staff, leave voicemails, do the whole thing. And people will respond to that. This being for brewery owners, this is the one I always throw out, is I got a TTB license application approved in 7 days one time because I called my representatives and they advocated for us. Your representatives work for you. They are there to advocate for your interests. And so it's super important for them to know what your interests are. And the only way they're going to know that is if you tell them. The entirety of the Senate and Congress's contact information is on the web. It's easy to look up. They've got multiple offices, which means you can leave them multiple voicemails every day. You can write them letters. I think it's super, super important right now to, as a small business owner or a small business operator, think about what are the challenges you're experiencing that your representatives might not know about. Like, obviously, they're concerned about public safety and, like, we're appreciative for what's happening there. But they don't actually know how to run a brewery. And so you need to make sure that you are taking the time to tell them what you as a small business owner need and what would be helpful from the federal government, from the state government, from local governments. That advocacy works, but more importantly, I think it's very necessary just because with the exception of the governor of Colorado, I don't know many politicians who have ever run a brewery before. So I think making time to do that advocacy is super, super crucial right now. And I encourage everybody to reach out to their representatives and let them know what they could be doing to help small businesses.
Thank you, Collin. That is some great information, and thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
If anybody has any questions, the screen right now is showing the contact information both for me and for Collin. We'd be happy to follow up with anybody that would like to know more about the topics we talked about. There is a lot happening right now. Things are changing rapidly, but we're all here to help. Collin, thank you again for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I hope you all have a great day.